baby's onesie there you want to put in this pure soap flake.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. The show is brought to you by support of our sponsors like cart-king.com, 877-8777. If you ever thought about going to the car or kiosk business, you want to have one of those flower carts or coffee, food cart or kiosk in the middle of a mall or a hotel lobby, King.com can be the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail coffee, food carts, and kiosks that money can buy. Been in business for 20 years. Whatever kind of business you're in, go to cart-king.com. Check out the different styles and models that they have. Pick out the one you think applies to your business. They'll custom design it for you, custom build it, then ship it worldwide. You can go to email or photograph in my book, The Excellent Investigator. Also, you need ad search locates, adoption investigations. You think your spouse is cheating on your infidelity investigation, we can trace an email address back to online dating websites and catch them cheating online. AlmightyGold.com. AlmightyGold.com, they know that it's difficult to afford gold in large quantities. So what they do is they introduce you these carat bars, where you can buy gold in minor quantities from as little as 1/10 of a gram. Each gold bar is inset into the carat bar frame, which is of a standard credit card size and covered by a safety laminate, imprinted with a unique DNA for counterfeit protection and provided with a blacklight authenticity signature on the front. AlmightyGold.com has a cryptocurrency that's backed by gold, and also too, you can go run a gold business yourself. You can become an affiliate for free. You go to AlmightyGold.com, you sign up to become an affiliate marketer, and wherever you post that link, anybody clicks on that link and buys some gold, you're going to get a commission on that. Pure Soap Flakes Company, puresoapflake.com. Now, I've been educated on this. I found out that the problem with the palm oil is not that they put in the palm oil in the soap and then the orangutans can't eat the palm oil. The problem is that they, what do you call it? They're deforestation to create these palm oil plantations, and that's what's causing the orangutans to starve. But the good news is that Pure Soap Flake Company solves that problem because they don't use any of that palm oil. Okay, that's the bottom line here, guys. So you can bathe your body and wash your clothes with pure soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, and sodium lauryl sulfate and synthetic additives. The products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin. If you want to put your little baby's onesie there, you want to put in this Pure Soap Flake product there. Not that detergent, harmful detergent. You can order today at puresoapflakes.com, greenhome.com, amazon.com, Whole Foods, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company. Okay, my first guest today is Tom O'Neill, and the book is called Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. Fascinating content. I was just talking to Tom off the air, and we have a lot of things in common. So Tom O'Neill, are you there?
I sure am. How you doing?
Good. I'm doing good. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate this.
Thanks for having me.
Tell the who is Tom O'Neill? Can you tell the audience?
Well, you sound like you're from New York. I'm from Philadelphia, but after Philly, I went to NYU. And, hang on. That's my alarm I set so I wouldn't miss your call, but I think it's off. Sorry about that. After NYU, I stayed in New York, and I was there about 20 years, driving a horse and carriage in Central Park and trying to make a living as a writer. And after a while, I got my foothold in magazines and newspaper reporting, got a job on a magazine with a contract, and was mostly writing celebrity profiles. But I do have to say there's another Tom O'Neill out there who spells his name, I think, with one L at the end, and does the same type of reporting, entertainment reporting, but mostly about award shows and what women wear on the red carpet. That's not me. That's a different guy. A lot of people mix us up. I think he gets calls about Manson, and I get calls about red carpets, which is annoying. But I ended up doing that, and I started an investigative series for the magazine I was at, on the entertainment industry. It was called the Us Report. It was Us Magazine, which was a monthly, and we did long stories, 3,500 words to 5,000, and I would do these investigations about stuff like the treatment of women at Saturday Night Live, or how people were kind of lied to and stolen by producers that were competing for guests on daytime talk shows, that kind of thing. And then that magazine turned into a tabloid, a weekly, and I left the magazine, and so did most of the other people at the top of the masthead, and they all went to Premiere, and I was freelancing. And in March of '99, my former editor called me from Premiere and asked me to do a story on what was then going to be the 30th anniversary of the Manson murders. And I told her I wasn't interested, but I'd never read Helter Skelter, had no interest in the case, and what could I say anyway about something that's been written to death? And she said, "You'll find an angle. You need the money and you need a foothold here. Do it." She was still my boss, even though she wasn't. So I agreed kind of reluctantly, and then this happened 20 years later. I've done nothing but that, but I finally have a book out, which feels good.
Hey, you're not going to believe
this. In a nutshell, I moved out to LA in '97, and this began in Los Angeles in '99.
You know, when I was back in New York, I used to have one of those handsome cab medallions with the horse and carriages from Central Park.
You owned one, or you drove it?
I owned one. I owned one in partnerships with Randy Grill, who was the president of the handsome cab.
Oh, yeah. I remember Randy. Wow, you never drove though.
No, Randy. I never drove. Yeah.
He had a silver carriage, right? A silver and blue carriage.
It was called Ghost Shadow. It was purple. It had some purple on it too. The horse was the horse was called Ghost Shadow.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's a small world, man. It's a small world. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Those medallions were worth a lot once. I don't know if they still are, but I hope they are.
I don't know, but because there was so much scandal and stuff like that, and fines and stuff like that. I don't think.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, that was a tough business. A tough business in those days.
Randy
yeah. Okay. Now everyone's familiar with Helter Skelter and Vincent Bugliosi. What did he get wrong? And tell us what really happened.
Well, it's kind of hard to put it. I mean, to explain it all without giving context, but sure. I guess the easiest way is I found out that a lot of the facts, as he presented in his book, Helter Skelter, which was to this day the best-selling true crime book of all time, weren't facts at all. They were fictions that he had kind of invented. And you can kind of get away with that in nonfiction. You shouldn't do it, but he also did the same thing when he prosecuted the case 3 years or 4 years before the book came out. He allowed people to perjure themselves on the stand that were his prosecution witnesses. He withheld evidence from the defense attorneys that when I later showed it to them, they said they would have done they actually didn't put on a defense. And one of them, Paul Fitzgerald, who represented Patricia Krenwinkel, one of the killers, told me they would have put on a defense if they had this information, that it would have changed the whole case. And even eventually Stephen Kay, who co-prosecuted the case with Vince Bugliosi, when I showed him the same documents, he looked at them, and after he realized that they were authentic, and as he said, this is Vince's own handwriting, I don't understand this. He goes, I don't know what to think about this case anymore. I thought I knew everything about this, and I don't know what to believe now. So it's a lot of little things I found out that add up to kind of creating a question mark about the motive that he had presented for the murders. The famous Helter Skelter motive that Manson did this to ignite a race war, during which he'd hide out with a family in a hole in the desert. And after the blacks had wiped out the entire white race, he and his followers would reemerge from their hole, subjugate the blacks, and repopulate the world with Manson's perfect, pure white children. That kind of, I shouldn't say kind of, but what I found out was there was a kind of philosophy like that spoken about at the ranch, but Manson never believed it. Most of the people didn't, and Vince was able to harness that and use it and embellish it. And again, it's, fine to do that in a book, but when you're presenting what's supposed to be facts to the jury, you're not supposed to embellish and make stuff up. And at the very least, you have to share any exculpatory evidence with the defense, and he didn't. So there's a lot of stuff in the case that was different and wrong.
Yeah, if people want to find these documents, they could find them on your Instagram and on your Facebook page?
They can, yeah. I have. Actually, they don't need to go to both because both of them pretty much have the same thing, but I've been told, and I'm not very big on the social media, I'm learning, but I've been told that some people like Instagram, some people go to Facebook, but if you want to see them on Facebook, it's the title of the book, and just put the title of the book in the Facebook search. And if it's Instagram, the handle is Chaos the Book. Gotcha. So you'll see a lot of documents I've scanned, photographs I've scanned, stuff that is talked about in the book, but we didn't have enough room to publish. And also, I even have audio tapes of interviews I've done with some of the principals like Stephen Kay, Terry Melcher. We're going to put one up with Vincent Bugliosi threatening to sue me and ruin my life, but that's still to come. But I'm trying to get something up there every couple new posts a week.
Wait, well, Bugliosi's gone now, so I guess you're the last man standing, right?
Yeah, Manson. And then Manson left. I really wanted Bugliosi to be alive for this because I wanted him to be held accountable. And a lot of people think that I waited until he passed away because I was frightened of his threats and lawsuits, and I really wasn't. I mean, I was devastated when I heard he died. And I did have a kind of begrudging respect for him, even though the threats he made towards me were pretty serious. But I really, really wanted him to be alive and have to answer for this stuff, and unfortunately he isn't.
And what do you think it was that motivated Bugliosi to come up with this?
Well, it could have been a few things. If I had to lean in one direction, he hired a collaborator, a co-author, Kurt Gentry, before the trial started, put him in the front row of the trial. He had a reserved seat every day, and he was playing as much to Kurt Gentry and his future book audience as he was to the jury, which automatically raises questions about a conflict of interest. You know, was he doing a more sensational prosecution because he knew it would be a better book? He could never do that today. I mean, the bar has rules against it. But back then they didn't, and nobody really knew anyway until, all the defense attorneys knew because they're the ones who told me about it first, and I asked Kurt Gentry, and he said, yeah, I was there every day. So I think it could have been as simple as that. Or when you get deeper into the book, when I start talking about the strange connections Manson had to government agencies and kind of these fringe groups that were trying to dismantle and spread disinformation about the left wing, it could have been the fact that Bugliosi had been approached by a representative of one of these agencies and said, this is how you try the case. He was a compromised man, Bugliosi, before he was assigned the case. He was involved, as you'll see in the book if you read it, in a case where he stalked and harassed a person and that he became kind of convinced was the father of his child. So this is an entirely personal story that would otherwise be irrelevant to what I was doing, but I found out that not only did he use the DA's office to investigate this guy who was his former milkman, but he threatened him and misrepresented himself to him. And when he was caught later, he lied to the media and said that the guy had stolen a couple $100 from his kitchen table when he had been his milkman in 1965, and that's why he was following him. He was conducting his own investigation. Of course, that story didn't hold water because when he was following him, it was after the statute of limitations had run out on a crime like that. If he had done it, it was more than 3 years later. And, there was no record of the Pasadena Police Department of him ever reporting this stuff. So the DA's office found out about this. It all came to light in early 69 or mid 69. He should have been the last attorney that got assigned a case this important and this high profile when they knew he was slightly, for lack of a better term, unhinged. But they gave it to him, and I pure speculation. I do wonder if they gave it to him because they could control him and have him do things an attorney with integrity might not do because they had that leverage over him.
Yeah, and later on, he kind of promoted the party line on the JFK assassination.
Right. Yeah, he wrote his magnus opus. Can't remember what it was called now. He spent as long as I did writing my book. Again, ironically, I think he said 20 years writing his book to prove, as he alleged, that, Oswald was the lone assassin. There was no conspiracy. And, there's a lot of serious assassination researchers who've taken his book apart, page by page, chapter by chapter, and their conclusion is he was working in someone else's interest to write that book, that he was writing that for I don't want to speculate, but that it wasn't done solely to make money, and it didn't. The book was like a phone book. It's like 1,000 pages. It's really difficult to sell a book like that, I know, because I wanted my book that long, and they said absolutely not. So, yeah, was he compromised his entire career? Who knows? But it's something I'm hoping that other people will start looking into now that I brought all this stuff to the light,
Yeah, and you mentioned, too, that off the air we were talking about that Dave McGowan was a good resource for you in all this?
Yeah. I can't remember. Obviously I talked about Mae Brussel in there. And I think it was Paul Krasner, who unfortunately just passed away a few days ago. He lived not too far from me in Venice, and we had mutual friends. And frankly, I'd never heard of him in 1999 when I began this. But once I started looking into his writing, you had to be careful with him because he was a satirist, and a lot of the stuff he wrote was satire based on experiences he had. So there'd always be like a nugget of truth. But I ended up taking him out to lunch a few times at Venice, and he was just such a charming, unique guy that even I didn't really use too much of what he shared with me. But he did provide me with some good leads. And I think he was the one who put me in touch, told me about Mae Brussel. So I started listening to her broadcast. You'll see a lot of her information in my book that I kind of then, did my own investigation off of. And then also I got in touch with McGowan, who was great. I mean, he was sending me tapes. I still have, I think, 100, 200 audio tapes, just because he wanted to help other researchers. And a lot of his stuff was too far out for me, but a lot of it wasn't. And I didn't know that he passed away. You just told me that. That's too bad. But these guys, there's not a lot of researchers like that left anymore. I mean, Mae Brussel never made any money doing what she did. And it's unfortunate that people aren't interested in, really looking beyond what's on the surface of these historical events.
Yeah, and in the back of Mr. O'Neill's book, too, there's a bunch of notes, and it has Peter Dale Scott back there, and Eugenio, who was also another guest on our show. So a lot of people, a lot of common interests. We have Dave Emery coming on the show in a couple weeks, too.
Eugenio, I still talk to, and I haven't talked to Peter Dale Scott for a long time. I hope he remembers me, but he was a huge help in the first couple of years. I would call him all the time.
Well, you mentioned in the title, Charles Manson, the CIA. How does the CIA fit into all this?
Well, you will find out at about chapter 11 in the book that when I was exploring Manson's time in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco during the Summer of Love of 1967, something that Bugliosi, I think, gave a page to in Helter Skelter, a page and a half to, which was, the period that he transformed from this illiterate ex-con kind of tiny little man that was unremarkable in every way possible into this messiah with a cult following of mostly young women who would eventually do anything he asked them to do, including kill strangers, complete strangers on command. During that period, those 3 or 4 months in the Haight, his parole officer, Roger Smith, who was, basically gave him a get-out-of-jail-free card. Every time Manson got arrested, Roger Smith wouldn't send him back to prison, but instead almost rewarded him. And also started doing drug research at the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, which opened in June of 1967, and had Manson report there for his weekly parole meetings with him. Manson and the girls were going there anyway for medical care because the girls had, a lot of them had STDs and there were pregnancies. But in that little kind of petri dish of research and medical care was another fellow named Jolly West, Louis J. West, who was a psychiatric researcher from Oklahoma at the time. He was at the University of Oklahoma on sabbatical doing research on LSD and the hippies and the hate. And in the mid 70s, West was accused of being part of what they then found out was something called the MK Ultra program, which was a mind control program that the CIA started. MK Ultra began roughly 52 and lasted till about 72 or 73. And at the time, it was the most expensive operation the CIA had ever done and the most secretive. West was accused of being one of the contracted outside researchers on the front page of the New York Times, and he denied it. And he actually went to his grave denying that he'd ever had any association with the CIA, MK Ultra, or even drug testing on humans. He said he confined it to animals. And I found papers in his own archive that sure they contradict that. They were actually letters between him and Sidney Gottlieb, who was the doctor who began MK Ultra at the CIA. And they were basically outlining these horrific Nazi-like experiments that West was going to do on patients at the time at Lackland Air Force Base and also prisoners. And then, as he said to Gottlieb in one of his letters, we eventually need to take these tests out into the field.
And that's when they had that hippie crash pad they set up to dose people with LSD?
Yeah, the Haight-Ashbury Project, where he had graduate students dressed as hippies, luring these kind of runaway kids into this crash pad that was financed by the Psychiatric Foundation, something for research, which I was able to later show was funded by the CIA. It's a fund for the CIA. And I also got the diaries of some of the grad students who were working there under West, and they each said the same thing. We're not really sure why we're here, what we're doing, and what his intentions really are. He's never here. When he comes here, he comes in disguise and acts in a military manner. He had been a colonel in the Air Force, but they said the one woman especially just wrote like pages and pages of the fact that she felt she was being duped and used for something else. And you know, they had something called safe houses where LSD experiments were done in San Francisco the year before by someone named George Hunter White, where they would lure men in. Prostitutes would lure men into these apartments that had two-way mirrors and all kinds of psychedelia stuff, and that they would get dosed with LSD, and Gottlieb and other scientists would study them and gauge their reaction. So the questions I raised, some of them I don't answer. I just, set forth everything I found as whether this project was also a safe house for the CIA where they were experimenting. And did Manson, I can't put Manson in the Haight-Ashbury Project. I was never able to find any evidence that he was one of the hippies in and out of there, but he was definitely at the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic where Roger Smith and David Smith were doing their drug research. And West, as David Smith, the director, told me, was given an office there to recruit subjects. And those are Dr. Smith's own words for his LSD research.
Now, along the lines of the MK Ultra stuff, did you come across anything about Charles Manson being at Boys Town and being molested at Boys Town?
Yeah. I got access to his federal parole file, and some of it went way back. And, it's a little confusing because Manson constantly changes his story. And, there's a so-called autobiography that was written with Noel Emmons, who worked at had been a prisoner with Manson, then later worked at it. And in the book, Manson talks about a lot of that. Later on, he retracted his involvement. He said that Emmons made everything up. So there is evidence that he had been at these, I know he was at the federally run institutions when he was underage and had been a victim, I think, of sexual abuse, and then also been a perpetrator on other boys.
Mm-hmm. Now, and you mentioned, too, that when he was on parole, his parole officer used to give him a ride. In my personal life, my professional life, I'm a private investigator. I do criminal defense work, and it's been my experience that would indicate someone's an informant. You become an informant for your parole officer.
Well, yeah. I mean, I started wondering that myself and wondering if I was going crazy, thinking, well, why would they have a crazy guy like this as an informant? Yeah. And then the more law enforcement people I talked to said, it doesn't matter how crazy they are. If we need information and we think they can be a conduit to information, sometimes that's all we need. Is names, places for drugs. They don't have to, we're not sending them out to do things. So there's so many different kinds. And the first time I really took the possibility seriously was I brought through a Freedom of Information Act request, a battle that took more than a year. I got access to Manson's federal parole file from the Bureau of Prisons and got about 3/4 of it. They still withheld about 1/4. And in that file had all these other records of Manson's arrests and releases during the 2.5 years or so he was out of prison and up to his arrest in Death Valley in October of '69 that Bugliosi had never reported and Sanders missed. And I brought all that stuff to a fellow named Lou Watnick's house, and Louis Watnick had been the head DA for Van Nuys, and he was later a judge and even had Manson appear for him on one of the charges before the bench before he was known. He was an internationally known person. He was just a hippie then. But when Watnick, who was retired, looked at all these documents, and it's in the book, he starts going, chicken shit. This is all chicken shit. And I'm like, what are you talking about, Mr. Watnick? He said they clearly wanted him out rather than in. He was more important to them on the outside than the inside. And I said, so you're saying? And he goes, God damn it, he was an informant. He goes, often you'll see incompetence and there'll be a couple releases. He said, but this is a pattern here. And there's no way it was not anything but deliberate. He looked at me and he said, well, you've got to find out who he was working for. Was it the sheriffs? Was it the LAPD? Was it a federal agency? He goes, I have no idea, but he was definitely working for someone.
And what about that escort service? It was Star Entertainment, is that what it was called?
Yeah. I don't know how much of that really came to fruition. I know that Bobby Beausoleil and I can't remember the name, Jack Gerard, I think it was a guy who was Bobby Beausoleil's connection to the Sunset Strip dancing girls. They were trying to get Manson's women involved in that. The women definitely prostituted themselves, or at least were told to have sex by Manson with people, and in exchange, Manson got what he wanted. But I don't know whether they were actually part of a official company.
Yeah, because that's usually a conduit, too, for blackmail and informants, is escort service.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
The other end of things. Bobby Beausoleil, all right. What do you make of his business? He was allowed to, I know you had some new information about Beausoleil that I had never seen before. I don't recall what it is right now. But what do you make about him being allowed to, Kenneth Anger, to do the music for Kenneth Anger while in prison? What the hell's going on there?
Well, Anger's an interesting guy. I tried to interview him, but he wouldn't talk to me.
Yeah.
And I don't think he likes talking about Bobby Beausoleil. I don't remember if I heard that Bobby Beausoleil burnt down his house. He definitely stole some footage that Anger had shot, and they had an interesting relationship before Beausoleil really spent a lot of time with Manson. I think Anger's still alive. In fact, I didn't even think of this. I should try to get him a copy of the book and see if he'll talk to me now. But no, I even went to one of his art openings in Los Angeles probably 10 years ago. And he was elderly then. He went in a wheelchair, and I very politely asked him if he could talk to me another time, and he said he wasn't interested.
Yeah, he's alive and well. He's involved with that Adult Swim. That's a comedy and cartoon network in the middle of the night, you know?
I had no idea.
What the hell's going on there, man?
I don't know.
That makes you wonder, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's take a little commercial break, okay? We're here with Tom O'Neill. This is great stuff, man. Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. Check out, too, his Facebook page, which is under the same title, Chaos. And also to his Instagram page, too, is called Chaos, too. So Tom O'Neill, we'll be right back with more of Tom O'Neill right after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. AlmightyGold.com. Get your gold in affordable quantities. 1 gram, 2.5 grams, 5 grams, no minimum purchase required. Why save in paper when you can save in gold?
AlmightyGold.com understands it's difficult to afford gold in large quantities. No one can afford an ounce of gold. This is why Almighty Gold has introduced to you Carat Bars, a most reliable company where you can buy gold in minor quantities from as little as a tenth of a gram. That's like $6. Each gold bar is inset into the Carat Bar frame, which is a standard credit card size, and it's covered by a safety laminate. It's imprinted with a unique DNA for counterfeit protection and provided with a blacklight authenticity signature on the front. Gold, AlmightyGold.com. They have a cryptocurrency backed in gold, and you can become an affiliate at AlmightyGold.com and make a commission from any gold that is purchased from your affiliate link. It's contact us at almightygold.com. That's their email address. Contact us at almightygold.com. Gold! Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe add new point-of-sale locations across the country quickly, or bring in revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services to your office building, warehouse, or lobby? CartKing.com is the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail, coffee, food carts, and kiosks that money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application. That's www.cart-king.com. Give them a call at 877-986-7771. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you. So you go to the website, cartking.com, you check out their different designs and models. You pick out which design applies to your business. They'll custom design it for you, custom build it for you, and ship it worldwide. cartking.com. OppermanReport.com. Hey, do you like what you're hearing? Do you like the work that you see us doing here at Opperman Report? You can support that work by becoming a member at OppermanReport.com. And as you have access to over 200 exclusive shows and interviews that you can't find on YouTube or Spreaker or iHeart or iTunes or KYAH. You can't find them anywhere else online, exclusive to our member sections, to our members. Also, too, there's images, videos, documents, court docs, a lot of content there at OppermanReport.com. And it's the memberships that support the Opperman Report and allow us to play these shows for free on Friday nights and Saturday nights on all the stations you hear us on. You can also make a donation at OppermanReport.com. If you want to support the show and become a member, I can give you a discount. I'll give you 13 months for $65 if you email me directly at OppermanReport@gmail.com. And don't forget, you can hear your ad played here on the Opperman Report, reach hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people on a daily basis because the show is repeated every day all over the world. Contact me at OppermanReport@gmail.com and I'll give you a good deal on advertising rates.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're with Tom O'Neill. The book is called Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. Great stuff. He has all the sources of the usual suspects we have around here all the time. So this is right up our alley. Hey, did you ever get a chance to talk to Maury Terry?
I did, actually. He passed away, too, a few years ago, but I talked to him maybe 10 years ago or longer, and I had to go through some secret route of phone numbers. I can't remember what it was, but he was a pretty paranoid guy. But yeah. I got him on the phone a few times, and he was helpful.
What do you make of his theory of the process church of the final judgment being involved?
I don't know. You know, those guys, him and Sanders and stuff, it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility, but I've never seen any solid proof of anything more than this, like, peripheral passing in the night business. I mean, there's always been a guy I wanted to talk to named Victor Wilde,
right,
who sold leather, and I think Sanders wrote about him. I think Maury Terry did, too. I actually found him. I can't remember what happened now, if he wouldn't talk to me or if I just know I never was able to talk to him. I've got a whole list, unfortunately, because I keep thinking this is behind me, but I have a whole list of people that I wanted to get in touch with after the book. I mean, the last year has been nothing but writing the book. I wouldn't let myself report anymore, or I'd never finish it.
Yeah.
But I have a list of people that I want to talk to still, and he's definitely at the top of the list.
Did you come to a conclusion? What do you think the motive was?
That's the one thing. I hope it doesn't sound like a cop-out. I don't like answering because I present several possible scenarios, hypotheticals, and they're grounded in facts, documented, findings that I have in the book that conflict with Bugliosi's. And since I can't definitively say what I think the motive really was, I'd just rather let readers see all the evidence I have and reach their own conclusion. I mean, one thing that's important, and I hope it's emphasized enough in the book, is that Bugliosi told a Penthouse interview, or Penthouse magazine in the early 70s, that he was asked whether he thought Manson really believed in Helter Skelter, the motive, the story, the pit in the desert, and he said absolutely not. And he said he was sure the women did, and Tex, and probably the men, but not Manson. And the reporter didn't ask him a follow-up question. Rolling Stone magazine did their last really big story on Manson with an interview of Manson, I think in 2015 or 16. Eric Hedegaard wrote a really good piece, and he asked the same question. And Bugliosi said the same thing, that he didn't think Manson believed in it, but that the women did. And both Eric and the Penthouse reporter didn't ask the follow-up, which should have been, well, if that wasn't the reason that Manson sent them there, what was the reason? And I didn't see the Penthouse story till after I'd done all my Bugliosi interviews. And then when Eric put it in his story, I think Bugliosi was still alive, but he would not talk to me at that point because he said, we should now consider ourselves adversaries, and he wouldn't take my phone calls. And that was one question I really wanted to ask him. If Manson sent them there not to ignite a race war, what was the reason? Why did he do it?
Well, what about the people who think it was like drug deals?
I think there's a lot of evidence that it could have been. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to prove it either way, but I think I have a lot of new evidence in the book that reinforces what people believe would have happened if it had been a drug burn. I interviewed Billy Doyle and Charles Taco and even Tom Harrigan, who I only found a couple years ago, and it was too late really to get his stuff into the book. But those were the three original suspects in the murders, with the fourth being Pick Dawson, who died some time ago. But what they'll see in the book, I think, and that's why it was such a difficult book to write, because 1 year, 2 years, I think, oh my God, this is definitely a drug burn or a drug deal gone wrong. And then all of a sudden I find out all this evidence of another motive scenario and another. And I hope I've presented it coherently in the book, or my collaborator and I have presented it coherently enough in the book for people to really, decide in their own minds definitively what they think happened.
What about the stuff you hear about S&M tapes and videos and movies and snuff films and perhaps child pornography?
Yeah. I mean, Paul Krasner put a lot of that out into the ether, as did Ed Sanders, and I didn't find evidence that there was any of these tapes, but I didn't find evidence that there wasn't. And as you'll see in the book, Bugliosi told me something that was originally off the record, later became on record once again, the initial phase of suing me, Paul stuff to my publisher's attorneys, and the publisher's attorney said to me, does he understand that if this case goes to court, all these letters will become part of the public record?
Right.
So he's no longer on the record. So he talked about a videotape had been reported before that quite different than what it was in Helter Skelter. So I think it's more likely than they feel this and how to get to the question.
And what about the Sirhan?
Who's in them?
Sirhan.
I'm sorry?
Sirhan.
Oh, yeah. that was breaking for me, because I can't tell how much I spent investigating that shooting, the Robert Kennedy shooting.
Yeah.
I mean, I talked to every living cop or attorney, including Buck Compton, who prosecuted it, and witnesses that I could find. And I really thought we were going to be able to wedge that into my book, too, because of the parallels to what I'm saying might have happened to Manson and Sirhan. But we finally had to, we just said we can't tell this story. If we can't tell it completely, we just can't put it in the books. It will require an additional 3 chapters. So my collaborator and I are thinking of doing a follow-up just with the information that we had in the book. And there really is another, at least more to do. I really think will a lot of it to do. Want to fail in.
But what stories are hand about the drug sex parties over at Tate's house?
Oh, no, I never. I think, did Sanders write that?
No, that was Maury Terry. Maury Terry has that INS document. I've seen it. There's an INS document that says that Manson was involved with the Process Church. Papa John Phillips was involved. And Sirhan attended drug and sex parties at that house.
So what's an internal revenue?
No, INS, Immigration Nationalization Service. You never saw that document?
Yeah. I don't think I did, or if I did, a lot of times you'll see these documents and they won't have a source for the information in the document.
Right.
They'll have an unidentified source, and it's after the fact that Sirhan's done this, what he was alleged to have done. If that was generated before, then to me it would be valuable. But if it's someone telling a federal investigator this after Sirhan has done what he's done and or after Manson has done what he's done, then it's, this is what I found lots of that kind of information, linking Sirhan to Manson and stuff. And it was always with people who, were trying to get attention or had their own agendas. I was always looking for any kind of document, like you're saying, generated before anyone knew who Sirhan was. So if that was generated before, it probably wasn't if they mentioned Manson in it. I'd still like to see it. If you have a copy or can send me a link, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll get it to you. I got it from Maury Terry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now,
okay, yeah.
But Tex Watson too. Now Tex Watson's an interesting character, and you mentioned before, Mae Brussels was all over him. What did you come up with? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the most frustrating thing I came up with was I was interviewing his first personal attorney, and I was interviewing him in 2008 on the telephone. Called him up in Texas where he was still practicing, and asked him if I could talk to him about his early representation of Tex before Tex was even identified as a suspect in Tate LaBianca.
Right.
As Vince writes in his book, Boss had a chair the first week of October, drifted around to Hawaii, Los Angeles, and then went to Texas. And in November, once Susan Atkins started talking and the police started putting stuff together, and they all became suspects, the LAPD called Watson's family and said that they wanted to come down to interview him. And Watson's mother called Bill Boyd, who had represented Tex on a case when he was in college, and it was a prank. He stole some typewriters, but he was charged with a crime. So Bill Boyd told the parents to bring Watson to his office. They did, and Bill Boyd said, "Why would two LAPD detectives be flying down here to interview you? What could this be about?" And he said, "I have no idea, sir." And he said, "Well, I'm going to leave you alone for about an hour, and I think you better come up with an idea. I'm going to send your parents home." And so the parents went home. He let Tex sit for an hour, and then he went back and said, "Do you have any idea why they're coming?" He said, "I think it has something to do with the murder of Sharon Tate, that actress." According to what he told me to do, he asked Watson to tell him, no secret, no whole bars, turn on a tape recorder. And for 2 days, Watson told him how the murders happened, why they happened. According to Boyd, that there were also other bodies that hadn't been discovered yet that had been sold by the group. And he had all the tapes and told me about the 2008. I was going with another question, didn't know that when he did that tapes, because tapes then became my priority. And I love to hear them, Mr. Boyd. Could I fly down there? And right when I said that, he realized that he had violated the most important contract between an attorney and a client, which is confidentiality, especially if there were unsolved murders on the tape. So he started backpedaling, and first he said, well, Charles didn't talk about, his name was Charles too, that other people he had killed. It was knowledge he had of other people the Manson group had killed. And I said, well, I'd love anyway to come listen to them. He said, I could never do that without Charles' permission. And I said, Mr. Boyd, he'd never give me permission, because if he has anything that doesn't match every parole hearing story he's told about everything he's done with the group or knew about the group, he'll never get paroled, and he really wants to be paroled. Anyway, he said, call me and I'll see what I can do. And he put me off for months and finally told me that I was never going to hear them and to stop calling them. The long story short, he died. The tapes went into probate because his firm had gone bankrupt. So I made the same approach to the trustee in charge of the tapes, got her permission finally to, she was going to give me permission, but she wanted to talk to the DAs first. And I said, okay, I put her in touch with the DA in charge of the parole hearings, Pat Secura, and he was monitoring my progress because I had told him about it. We were friendly, and he really wanted access to him. So once he got involved, when the trustee called him, I was shoved out. And then Watson found out about it, went to court to stop it, and the DA and the LAPD fought for these tapes in Texas court for a year at great expense, and then won. And as soon as they got the tapes, they locked them down, refused to release them or let anyone know what's on them except to say there's nothing about other murders. I think those tapes have the truth about what really happened and why it happened on August 8th and August 9th. And the reason they're not releasing it is it would jeopardize the verdicts, the conviction. It's the first taped account of the murders by any of the Manson family members. And it was before they were publicly identified as suspects in Tate LaBianca the tape was made. Susan Atkins' tape was made about 3 or 4 days, 5 days later. And when you see in my book, you can't trust her account because she was compromised when the prosecution illegally switched her attorney and got her court-appointed attorney taken off the case by a compliant judge who replaced him illegally with a former prosecutor that Bugliosi's team had picked. So everything she says should not be taken. I mean, nothing that she told at her grand jury appearance or to anyone from the point that attorney represented her on can be trusted.
Okay, now this is fascinating. Watson is still alive, right?
Yeah. So if I approach him, he can release those tapes if he wants. He would have them. The DA's office was entitled to them, but Watson, since they were made by his attorney, should also have copies. Watson never for his copy. His attorney tell me that, or Charles, I can't call him Charles when I talk to his attorney. Charles wants nothing to do with those tapes. He says there's nothing important on them, and I believe Watson is delighted that the LAPD and DA won't release them, and I only think that's because it shows that Watson had a lot more to do with the murders and the stuff that was going on around the murders, and there could be information about other bodies.
This is fascinating. So Watson doesn't want them released, and the DA doesn't want them released. But what's even more fascinating to me, and I hate to get too far into the weeds, but how can this be a defense-related work product, and then somehow the DA's allowed to have that? That's insane. What's going on with that?
It's only because of Watson's compliance. Watson could say, give me my copy of the tapes and I'll release them. The judge decided that Watson had lost his confidentiality privilege because he had written a book with a prison member in 1967. He had allowed them to listen to a portion of the tapes, supposedly not all the tapes, but some of the tapes. But the judge ruled that because of that, there was more attorney-client privilege. So
that's still bold. That's still bold. It's a minister, and let's not get too far.
Yeah.
No. What about Felipe Tamarello? You mentioned something about that. I never heard that name before. What was that?
Yeah, Filippo Tenerelli was an Italian immigrant who come over with his father and mother, and I can't remember if it was 6, 7 brothers and sisters to Los Angeles in, I think, around 64, 65. And, they were just getting a new life like so many Italian immigrants in the United States. And Filippo had no prison record or arrest record. Good kid, rode motorcycles as a hobby. Supposedly stopped riding motorcycles after an accident that he had some severe leg injuries. And suddenly, I think it was, I can't remember what day in September, it's all in the book, he took his brand new Volkswagen and left the Culver City home. And the next thing you know, 4 days later, his body was found in a motel room in Bishop, California, which is one of the towns that borders the Death Valley, the northernmost town. And there was a gunshot wound in his head. And it's a long, complicated story, but they declared it a suicide. And it when you look at the police reports and when you see some of the subsequent reports filed by sheriffs and California Highway Patrol officers from that jurisdiction, they all believe that the Manson family was involved. And one of the officers was certain that he saw
three Manson family men, Steve Grogan, who later went to prison for murder, Danny DiCarlo, and I believe it was Tex Watson and Tenerelli in the car that he had pulled over a day before Tenerelli's body was found. The Inyo sheriff that discovered the car and began the sheriff's investigation of the car that had been dumped at what was called Father Crawley Point was positive that it had been dumped there a day after Tenerelli's body had discovered. But the coroner for Inyo and the police department and the Inyo head sheriff determined that Tenerelli had tried to kill himself by driving his car over into a 60-foot ravine, or no, much more than 60 feet, I can't remember, at Father Crawley Point, and failed to kill himself, took his belongings out of the car, hitchhiked to Bishop, and they have all the records in the file I found. He went out and bought a shotgun, a couple Playboys, I think it was 2 bottles of whiskey, a razor, and a gun cleaning kit. And the next day, when they found his body, I think a bottle and a half of the whiskey was gone, and he had a barely traceable blood alcohol content in the system. And the crime scene was bizarre. You can read about it in the book, but one of the questions was, why would he buy a gun cleaning kit if he was going to kill himself with the gun he bought? So, and there are a lot of questions about what happened with that police case. And when I brought the evidence, actually Deborah Tate brought the evidence to the Bishop Police Department that I had uncovered in 2008, and they briefly reopened the investigation, sent 2 detectives down to meet with me in Los Angeles, who went off the record with me, turned off their recorder. Unfortunately, I didn't have a recorder going, but it's obviously a murder. And sometimes either claim suicide or a case of a family, the Manson family, lived in Los Angeles. They told me when I interviewed them, they believed he was in mind to himself. They believed that, that he hadn't. And I said, why didn't you do something about it? And they said, well, he had just come from Italy, and the possible in the air, so we were actually in capacity. It disappeared. So, goodbye. And now, this cost-ancient stuff, I think was very important to Catholics, especially Italian immigrant Catholics. You can't be buried in a Catholic cemetery if you're a suicide. And I don't go ahead and the future. So they try to have that changed right now. I think they're preparing a lawsuit against the city, and there's a couple other media platforms doing a story, thank God, following up on a lot of the evidence I uncovered and taking it a little further. I hope that could be out in a few days.
So much detail. I haven't heard of it. So now, after so much and different tools and rattles, crap, got all these. No more now, or are you more confused now?
I might be a little more confused.
Yeah.
I don't know. You tell me. I sometimes, I'm just glad it's all in a book, because I've always been worried that I'm going to get run over by a bus or something, and all this stuff's going to end up in a dumpster somewhere. So I don't care anymore. I'm just glad it's out there for people to read, and I've made a record of what I found out, and I don't care if I'm not confused anymore.
Hey, let me ask you a question.
Trying not to think about it.
Is there like a library or Charles Manson library or museum where your research and your material would go, God forbid, if something happened to you? No.
I hope the book is enough for now, but yeah, I've thought about that. I think there's a photograph in the book of my office, which doesn't get everything, but I've got a massive amount of files. And when you read the book, you'll also see the Kennedy assassination gets in there, the John Kennedy assassination. A lot of, an important crime that occurred in Texas in 1954, the Jimmy Shaver murder. So I've got so much stuff, and, I've got a big family, so if anything did happen to me, God forbid, I'm sure that they would make sure it all went to a university or someplace, because I do want people to, take my research and keep going forward with it, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. Tom O'Neill, the book is called Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the secret history of the 60s. We didn't even get into his celebrity context, but we are out of time. What do you want to leave us with?
If you're interested, please buy the book. I still owe a lot of people a lot of money, including one publisher who canceled the deal and then sued me for the advance, which I still haven't paid off. But I also just want people to buy the book or go to the library and get it, because I think it's important. It's an important kind of alternative story to the Bugliosi Helter Skelter. I do think mine is grounded more facts than his is, and I think people need to know both words.
Yeah, people can go to the Opera Report bookstore on our website, too, and I'll have a link in all the description on YouTube and all the podcast platforms. Tom O'Neill, thank you so much. Okay, I'd love to have you back. We just barely scratched the surface on this, man. There's just so much we can get into.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you having me. This has been fun.
No, thank you very much. And, we know a lot of the same people, man. We should, especially Randy Grill.
I know. Are you in Vegas?
I'm in Las Vegas.
Next there, I'll look you up.
Please do. I would just because I can tell you alone. Tony, thank you so much, man.
And I have some for you out here.
If you look his name now, then you see a new one every now and then. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Dave.
Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, history of these, because sources like that. These are all our people, man. Peter Thiel, Dave McGowan, Maury Terry. I knew President was good. And, I'll tell you, I'll maybe in an after show, I'll tell you the story about me and the horse and carriage story about that and the nightclub and all that. That's a pretty good story. So thank you so much, Tom O'Neill.
Emailrevealer.com. People ask me all the time, hey, Ed, are you still a private investigator? I sure am. Go to emailrevealer.com. We handle adoption investigations, infidelity investigations, where you give us your spouse's email address. We trace it back to online dating websites, catch them cheating online. Email tracing, locate or identify somebody from as little as an anonymous email address. Someone owe you money? Back child support? We can find that deadbeat. Locate his hidden assets. Locate his current of employment, even assist in a judgment. Email revealer to friend forensic with the leaks messages, report in court. Email 800-579-962. Flake 2156852. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern facility. Clean your body and wash your clothes with pure soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium salt, synthetic additives. Keep clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin. They drains in waterways and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. Order today at puresoapflakes.com, greenhome.com, amazon.com, or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company, a proud member of the handcrafted soap